Let's get started with our first keynote. Today, we have with us Esti Peshin, VP and General Manager at the Cybersecurity Division of Israel Aerospace Industry, IAI-ELTA. Esti will be talking about cyber resilience as a master key of cybersecurity. Please feel free to post any questions you may have, and we will do our best to answer them before the session ends. You can also reach out to IAI-ELTA by going to the company booth for text, voice, or video chat with the booth manager. So I'll hand over now to you, Esti. Good morning, Esti. How are you?
Very good. How about yourself, Jose?
Well, not too bad, not too bad. I'm super glad to have you aboard. I mean, I was waiting for this discussion. So far this week, we have had an amazing contribution for some of our friends from Israel. We have had Israel Electric. We have the Ministry of Environmental, and right now we have we have had Noam Krakover on Thursday talking about transportation cybersecurity. So I'm very excited right now to listen and learn a little bit about cyber resilience as a master key of cybersecurity. So please go ahead. I'm gonna stay with you until we are sure that everything is perfect in terms of communications and you have your slide ready. And then I'm gonna hand over to you and learn a little bit about the topic.
Thank you so much, Jose. So let me share my presentation. Can you see it now in presentation mode?
Absolutely, I can see it perfectly.
And let me move one slide ahead. Can you see my next slide?
I can see you flying.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm all set. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Esti Peshin from Israel Aerospace Industries, and we are going to speak today about resilience as the master key for cybersecurity. So a few words about myself. I'm the General Manager of the Cyber Division in Israel Aerospace Industries, and I'm also a ULM pilot. You can see me in a few typical positions, flying on the coastline of Israel and landing in the north of Israel and actually flying my plane. And you can also see me in a position that was a bit more common a few years ago before COVID, participating in a cyber exhibition in Israel. So let's start speaking about cyber resilience. So we have been seeing several strategic trends in cybersecurity in the past few years. First and foremost, we have seen more and more state and superpower involvement. Cyber is a strategic domain, and state and superpowers utilize it in order to actively affect soft power projection. We're seeing a growing trend of cybercrime even in countries where the crime level is relatively low. We're seeing more and more cyber attacks on critical infrastructures. We're seeing large-scale industrial espionage. So this basically means that any information that you have online is insecure. We're seeing influence campaigns. These are campaigns that are targeting our minds, attempting to convince us, to hoax us into, for example, voting for a candidate that we wouldn't have voted for otherwise. The CNI campaigns are disrupting democracies around the world. And finally, we are seeing proliferation of malware. Malware is readily available on the web. It is accessible to practically anyone. So we are seeing more and more use of publicly available malware by the threat actors. In the past year and a half, we have seen two additional trends. First and foremost, supply chain attacks. These attacks are targeting our supply chains, software we download, patches we download. We are also seeing cyber attacks, even minor cyber attacks, accompanied by media campaigns. So basically, they're attacking us, but they're also trying to disparage us. So these are the strategic trends we are seeing today in cybersecurity. COVID has changed the way we do business. We are seeing a more and more adoption of work from home technologies. Today, many companies, even those who returned to physical locations, are adopting a hybrid approach, allowing their employees to work from home for a certain period of time every week. We are seeing heightened activity on customer-facing networks, greater use of online services. Consider, for example, this amazing conference. It is conducted online. I'm sitting now here in Israel, in Jerusalem, and speaking to you online. And finally, we are seeing more and more use of personal devices and email for working purposes. So my home computer can be used by children for gaming activities in the morning, additional children for schooling activities in the afternoons, and by me at night in order to connect to my office network. The bad guys are aware of these opportunities and are abusing this situation to their advantage. And in this context, we have seen several types of threats emerge and increase during the coronavirus crisis. So we're seeing more and more phishing attempts. Now, in the past, there were certain populations that didn't use the online services as much as we do. And I'm considering myself and my esteemed audience here as tech savvy. But my mother, for example, is not that tech savvy. And COVID forced her to start using more and more online services. So my mother is a very good potential target for phishing campaigns because she may not be as aware as I am of the potential phishing attempts, and she may not be as acute as I am looking for the telltale signs that a certain email is a phishing email. By the way, my mother is well aware of that, having me as her daughter, but I'm speaking about the common person. Then we're seeing more and more cybercrime. Again, even in countries where the crime level is relatively low. We have seen the bad guys targeting healthcare, targeting the healthcare ecosystem. We have seen attacks against hospitals, attacks against companies that are developing the vaccine. Some of them related to industrial espionage. Some of them are just cynical attacks, trying to harm the industry that is now trying to maintain our health amidst a global pandemic. We are seeing targeting against remote services. And finally, and this is my personal favorite, we are seeing tech support scams and robocalls. These are called phishing attempts or voice phishing attempts, where a certain person can receive a phone call asking him to provide credentials or personal data based on a bogus reason. So these are like phishing attempts, but are done over the phone. And again, the elderly are more prone to fall for these attempts because they are not expecting them. So the real challenge, and this challenge has been pronounced even more in the COVID era, is maintaining business continuity while maintaining cybersecurity. So we can achieve 100% of cybersecurity if we forego business continuity, if we don't allow, for example, working from home, if we provide more and more and more and more control that wouldn't allow us to conduct our normal business. We can also provide 100% business continuity if we forego cybersecurity. But the real challenge is maintaining both, allowing companies, individuals, critical infrastructures, and governments to continue going about their business without compromising cybersecurity. And when we are looking at the key cyber challenges, today we identify 6 such challenges. First and foremost, the skills deficit. This basically means that there are significantly more cyber attackers than cyber defenders, okay? Or that the need for cyber defenders is not fulfilled. And just to share with you, in 2019, January 2019, the CSIS, the Center for Strategic Studies in the US, published a report where they basically said that there's a shortage of 314,000 cyber experts in the US alone. You can double the figure by 2 and receive the global figure. This gap has increased, and today the experts are speaking about half a million cyber experts that are missing in the US and 1 million cyber experts that are missing globally. So this is a huge challenge, but it also entails a significant business opportunity, and I'll speak about this later. We spoke about the balance between cybersecurity and business needs. We also need to find a way to maintain digital trust and authentication. So if, for example, I communicate with Jose in an email, I don't really know if it's Jose writing to me. I can't see his face. How do I know that this is actually Jose? Or when I speak with someone on social media, how do I know that he's not impersonating someone? So this is a huge challenge that eventually the industry will have to overcome. We are seeing a huge trend of cloud transformation, digital transformation, governments, critical infrastructures, enterprises, and even private citizens transforming their business and migrating to the cloud for various reasons. The first and foremost is achieving more accessibility, but this entails obviously more cyber threats. Then we have the issue of automating cybersecurity. So I mentioned the skills deficit or the skill churn. So on one hand, we don't have enough cyber experts. On the other hand, the threats are increasing. So a potential solution would be automation. But automation means software, and software entails the additional cyber risks. So this is, in a sense, a two-edged sword. And finally, cyber resilience and defense. So a quote attributed to Albert Einstein says that we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So when we are talking about national grade cyber challenges, we need national grade cyber solutions. And these solutions comprise of 5 elements. The fourth one, I think, is the most interesting one. So number one, state-of-the-art technology. And as I will show you in a moment, Israel is a host of many, many, many cyber companies that have amazing technologies. But technology on its own is insufficient. We need also effective methodology on how to use this technology effectively and efficiently. The cyber domain is evolving. The threats are evolving. The solutions are evolving. So any solution we deploy must entail constant innovation. It must evolve to address new threats and to enable additional technologies. Number 4 is collaboration. The good guys must cooperate, must collaborate, must share information. And this opportunity here of the Innovation Summit is an excellent opportunity to share data, to share experiences, to learn from experiences of other entities. And finally, capacity buildup. This basically means training, awareness. Each and every person within a nation state should be cyber aware, should be cyber savvy, should be cyber literate. And I will show some data about this in a moment. So today, the paradigm we are speaking about is cyber resilience. So the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resilience is that cybersecurity basically means trying to protect the fort. So initially, we spoke about hardening the targets, hardening our networks, erasing the walls so that breaches will not affect us, will not be able to enter our domain. But then we understood that this is practically impossible, so we started speaking about risk mitigation or limiting the potential damages. So protecting our crown jewels, maybe monitoring the network in order to raise the defenses as and when a situation occurs that requires us to do that. But since then, the ecosystem evolved to a resilience approach. And resilience basically means the ability to quickly withstand or recover from cyber attacks. So initially, we looked at a target, we looked at an organization, and we tried to make it resilient. But then we understood that this is insufficient, especially in the era where we are constantly seeing supply chain attacks. So now we are talking about making the ecosystem resilient. Now, let me give you a personal example of the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resilience. So we all have our personal computers at home, and there is a chance, not very slight, that each and every one of us will wake up one day and see a red screen on our home computer and a note saying that if we want to recover our computer, well, we better pay so-and-so Bitcoins in order to release our computer and allow us to continue working. This is a ransomware attack. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Now let's consider our home computer. So we have some information on our home computers that is of interest to us, that is important to us. Mainly photos of the family, photos of the kids, right? So when such an occurrence happens, and I receive calls from friends that have been cyber hijacked from time to time, their main concern is getting hold of the photos. The photos are locked in the computer is inaccessible, and they're considering paying so-and-so Bitcoins because of the photos of the children. So the cybersecurity approach would be to raise the walls, to add additional cyber protections in order to prevent the next ransomware attack. A cyber resilience approach would be to download all the pictures to an external drive and maintain them in a separate environment. So if your computer is hijacked, well, so be it, format it, and everything is fine. You have your pictures. That's the difference between cybersecurity and cyber resilience. So when we are speaking about digital leadership, so digital leadership or achieving a next generation ecosystem requires 4 elements. Number 1, trust, trusted partners. The ability to know in a given moment that you are communicating with entities that you can trust, with known entities. Now, this requires a physical cyber approach, and there are technologies emerging in this area. You need resources and adaptation. Basically means that within your organization, you need to have a cyber organ that knows what he's doing, and you need to adapt the entire organizational approach to be able to better handle cyber incidents. We need collaboration, and I spoke about this at length. The good guys depend on the ability to share knowledge. If a certain organization has been cyber hacked and will share information about the hack with similar organizations, they can prevent the next attack. And vice versa, when the situation will be opposite. So information sharing is extremely important. And finally, we need to consider a robust and resilient approach. So what are some areas that really need cybersecurity or really need a cyber resilience approach? First and foremost, supply chain. Not enough solutions out there to be able to prevent a supply chain attack. If I download a benign patch from a certain organization that provided me a piece of software or a piece of hardware, there is no real way for me to know if this patch has been hacked, assuming the hack happened in the mother organization, the organization from which I'm downloading the patch. Now consider a situation, I'm not downloading a bogus patch, I'm downloading a real patch that has malware embedded inside. 5G, cellular networks, are the enablers of IoT. They basically allow things to speak to things. Not enough security controls for IoT environments, especially for complex IoT environments. Then we have smart mobility. Today, transportation systems are becoming smart in a sense that elements are speaking to other elements, making decisions online as transportation evolves. So we have smart cars, we have smart public transportation, we have smart traffic lights, and this basically means that there are inherent vulnerabilities within this environment. And finally, smart cities, which elevates smart mobility also to the extent of looking at sewage systems, at smart buildings, and so on and so forth. So these are areas that really need cybersecurity solutions or cyber resilience solutions. If you're looking to open a new startup, well, these are one of the areas you may want to address, and please do give us a shout out because we are constantly on the lookout for technologies in these areas. When we're speaking about establishing a cyber ecosystem, we need to take into consideration 3 elements. Number one, the government and operational element, the government and operational aspect, which basically means the organizational structure. Who is the national organization in charge of cybersecurity? The operational tools for managing cybersecurity and the legislation and regulation framework for establishing a secure ecosystem. But we also need the private and public sectors. They need to be resilient because our national cybersecurity derives from the weakest link. They need to be cyber aware and they need to practice information sharing. As I previously said, they need to share information about potential cyber attacks, potential cyber threats in order for the entire ecosystem to become more secure. Then we have the human resource. So we need to build our capacity. We need to make sure that we have sufficient cyber professions. We need to educate on cyber, and we need to have our population practice cyber hygiene, which basically means conducting themselves as personal individuals with best practices of cybersecurity. For example, if they receive a mail from an unknown sender with a link, well, it would be a good idea to apply the link, to press the link. Now, when we are speaking about taking cyber resilience to the next level, we are speaking about 6 elements. So I spoke about the ecosystem perspective. Creating a resilient organization is insufficient if we do not address the ecosystem. We need to address the human resource. We need to train on cybersecurity. We need to make sure that our entire organization, or when we're speaking about the nation state, our entire population is cyber aware. We need operational capabilities. And I will speak about those a little bit in a moment. But the essence is that we need the ability to harden our systems, to monitor our systems, and we need a certain capability of cyber threat intelligence in order to be able to foresee potential cyber attacks against our organization, a critical infrastructure, or our nation state. We need to practice a zero tolerance policy. And this basically means that we investigate everything. If there is a doubt that something is happening within cyberspace, there is no doubt. Look into it, understand what happened, make sure that this is not a cyber attack. In many cases, cyber attacks materializes through anomalies that may or may not be detected by certain systems. But if people are cyber aware and they see something strange and they report on it, you may be able to detect a cyber attack. But for this, you need a zero tolerance approach. We need executive responsibility and leadership. Well, basically, in organizations or nation state where the leadership is not cyber aware, does not put an emphasis on cybersecurity, well, they will not be cyber secure because cyber will come last. Cyber requires expenditures. Cyber requires efforts that the organization may not always want to exert. So executives and leadership must take responsibility, must lead the organization into the next era in order to achieve cyber resilience. And finally, we need playbooks. Playbooks are based on lessons learned. And the idea is to be prepared. When a cyber attack happens, or when there is a suspicion of a cyber attack, you need a playbook in order to operate properly. Now, keep in mind, this playbook will never be followed to the letter. There are always surprises, always unexpected occurrences, but the playbook provides you with a baseline on which you can build. You don't have to invent the entire thing, your entire courses of action. You have a baseline, and on this you can build the proper approach for a given cyber attack. When we're speaking about operational capabilities, we're speaking about 5 elements. Number 1, the capability of mapping assets and vulnerabilities, be it at the national level or the organizational level. We need to know what our assets are and which assets are vulnerable in order to be able to proactively address these vulnerabilities before the cyber attack happens. We need the ability to predict cyber attacks. So this is basically cyber threat intelligence taken to the next level. The idea is to utilize indicative signals in order to understand that a cyber attack is imminent and then to act upon this insight. We need the ability to monitor the national cyberspace and critical infrastructures in real time, monitor them and detect potential anomalies that may or may not indicate that a cyber attack is taking place. We need the ability to investigate and analyze potential cyber attacks. So something happened. Now we have media that may or may not have been infected. Let's understand what happened. Let's analyze what happened, and let's create the IOCs that will prevent similar attacks in the future. And finally, we need collaboration and information sharing. We need the ability to share information in a very simple and effective manner between like-minded organizations within the ecosystem in order to ensure that if a certain organization has been cyber attacked, other organizations won't be cyber attacked in the same manner. I previously promised to speak about cyber risk literacy. So this is a chart that was offered by Oliver Wyman, the consulting firm, and it basically shows the cyber literacy score for several countries around the world. You can see here Israel is number 8. Now, cyber literacy basically means how cyber prepared or cyber aware is your population. So it reflects the public motivation, the government policy, the educational system, whether or not we teach cybersecurity at an early age, the labor market, and the population inclusivity. Population inclusivity basically means that every, I'm going to use the word type of population, or every segment of the population is cyber aware. If, for example, your children are not cyber aware, but the rest of the population is, well, you are at risk. You are not as literate as you need to be. If men are cyber aware and women are not, well, same thing. And you can think about many more examples. Now, I spoke about the skills gap. So basically, there's a huge shortage of cyber experts. And this creates an enormous opportunity, especially for developing countries. Well, basically, what we try to say is that cyber can move the needle on national GDP. Or if, as a nation state, you decide to establish a cyber academy to train cyber experts, they can subsequently offer cyber services from your country to other country, because cyber is borderless, and help overcome the skills gap on one hand and contribute quite a few dollars annually to your national GDP. You can see here in the middle of the screen statistics by the World Gap that show direct relation between the investment in ICT and the GDP. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the Israeli journey. Israel started in 2011 with 50 cyber researchers. In 2018, the number exceeded 500. Israel started in 2011 with 200 companies. In 2018, the number exceeded 500. And you can see the tenfold increase in private investments in Israeli companies to 1.1 billion in 2018. And I'll show you the 2020 figures in a moment. And you can see the annual exports from 1 billion in 2011 to 5 billion in 2018. So let's speak about the Israeli cyber ecosystem in 2020. So these are figures that were provided by the Israeli National Cyber Directorate in their end of the year summary. So we can see that there have been $2 billion of investments in more than 100 deals, more than 20 export deals totaling $4.7 billion US. The total cyber export, remember the number in 2018 was 5 billion, totaled in 2020 6.85 billion. We have 5 new cyber unicorns, keeping in mind that 33 of the global cyber unicorns are Israeli. And 31% of the global investments of cyber are in Israel. So Israel is investing a lot in the cyber ecosystem and is seeing a huge return in this aspect, a huge economical return in this aspect. A few words about IAI. Israel Aerospace Industry is one of the largest defense contractors in Israel. It is proud to lead in the best and finest of Israel's cyber ecosystem and innovation. IAI leads two significant consortiums, the Israeli Cyber Companies Consortium, which offers national cyber solutions, end-to-end solutions around the world, and the Israeli Aviation Cyber Companies Consortium that is focused on cybersecurity solutions for commercial aviation. We have recently won the tender for establishing the Cyber Lab for smart intelligence transportation systems in Israel. This is a national cyber lab for smart mobility. And again, we have established a consortium in order to be able to effectively do that. So if I can conclude my brief keynote, number one, cyber is another major pillar in the battle against COVID-19. Cyber threats are evolving. Today, we are up against advanced cyber threats. We need a collaborative approach in order to address these threats. We need to establish a holistic defense framework, especially in the national level. Cyber resilience is the master key for cybersecurity in the national level, for critical infrastructures, for enterprises and companies, and even for us as private individuals. And finally, we need to strike a balance between cybersecurity and business continuity. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude my keynote. Please do stay safe and healthy, and feel free to contact us to learn more.
Thank you very much, Steve. Very interesting presentation, extremely well articulated. We have many questions from the audience, some of them more specific, some of them more philosophical, but I'm going to go through them. I mean, if you will. So, sure. First question is: do you think the key stakeholders in protecting us are fully aware of the serious risks we are facing when it comes to protecting critical infrastructures and services? I suppose they are assuming to the issues we have seen, for example, with hospitals being attacked in the middle of the COVID crisis in France and Germany, some people even dying. What's your thought on this?
Well, this is an excellent question, and thank you for this question. So first, let me answer from the Israeli angle. In Israel, the answer is yes. But when we're speaking about this question globally, then the follow-on question is, who are the key decision makers? So the National Cybersecurity Organ in Israel, for example, it's the National Cyber Directorate, may be well aware of the threats. And then they may issue a bulletin telling certain organizations, hey, you need to do so and so in order to protect yourselves. But the organizations are sovereign to decide whether or not to implement these controls. And in some cases, they decide not to do so because of budgetary constraints, because of the effort involved, because they don't believe the threat is as pronounced as it is. And in this case, while the key decision makers at the national level are aware of the threat, the specific organization may not be as aware or as acute. And these are the situations where eventually we encounter the cyber attacks. And this has happened several times in various organizations globally, where in spite of warnings, the organizations didn't act upon the warnings and were cyber attacked.
Wonderful. Very, very interesting element. You talk about during the discussion about ecosystem resilience, which is a very interesting concept. Okay, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be pessimistic, and I actually am an optimistic person, but we need to analyze data and we need to analyze trends. You touch upon, for example, ransomware, okay, which is a serious issue, and the trend is more serious, even, if you allow me. So when we talk about ecosystems of cyber resilience, do you understand them as national, or do you believe that we should be working on collaboration at the multinational or even the global level to actually boost cyber resilience?
Yes.
Just a tough topic, because sometimes it's different to collaborate within the country. So what's your thought on this?
So this is a very philosophical question, but a very, very good one. So my personal view is that we should strive as the human population to make cyber more secure. Now, the reason for this is because our kids are living today in a virtual world. They're constantly using online services, and cyberspace is insecure, so they're constantly facing threats. We are becoming more and more digital, but the domain in which we're operating is inherently insecure. So yes, I believe that cyber resilience should be practiced in a global context. However, there's a long road ahead in order to achieve this. And in order to be able to eventually achieve this, nation states should assume a cyber resilience posture within their nation. And companies should assume a cyber resilience posture within their small ecosystem. And even each and every one of us as individuals should assume a cyber resilience posture. But philosophically, I believe that eventually we need to have here a global approach.
Awesome. Next question is related to cyber threat, to CTI, cyber threat intelligence. So I saw in your presentation the immediate attack, the pre-attack, post-attack, and it's clear that threat intelligence is extremely powerful, or might be extremely powerful, leveraged properly. But the question is, where do you see the limitations also of CTI? Because it cannot achieve everything. We cannot predict the future, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
So my thoughts are that in order to achieve effective protection, we need three elements. If we practice only one of them or only two of them, we will never be able to achieve cyber protection. So the first element is hardening. We need to have as many controls as possible, taking into account the fact that we need to balance our business needs, but we need to have controls. If you have a computer that is not protected in any way, well, it's very bad news. We also need to have monitoring, because eventually the threats will overcome our controls. It's an arms race. So this monitoring will allow us to detect potential anomalies that may or may not indicate a cyber attack. And finally, we need CTI. But if we are missing one of these elements, then we won't be able to achieve cyber protection. Now consider a situation where we have only CTI. Okay, so we know that the threat is imminent, but what can we do about it? We don't have any controls, and we know that the threat is imminent, and let's assume this is a sophisticated threat that will overcome our controls, but we don't have anomaly detection. So we know it's imminent, but we don't have the ability to detect it. On the other hand, if we have anomaly detection and we don't have CTI, in most cases, we won't have context to the anomalies we are seeing. So the three elements are interleaved, and we need all three of them in order to be able to achieve effective cyber protection.
Thank you, Esti. There are many questions. We still have time, so I propose you to try to address them. This is an interesting one. I don't think it's a problem that is easy to fix, but one of the attendees, I am doing research, and he's based in Switzerland, he or she is based in Switzerland, to improve cybersecurity posture of small and medium enterprises, SMEs, which is a very interesting topic. Because we cannot forget that SMEs represent 60% of the economy in Europe, for example. 60%. Okay. As you specified, more sophisticated cyber attacks are happening at all the levels of enterprises. Number one, big problem in cybersecurity is considered as a less valued area in budget of organization. Supporting from top management is lagging. So he's talking about lack of support from decision makers at the company organization, right? And budget, right? And then IoT and industrial IoT are one area where organizations are facing most of the issues. Due to technical limitations, these devices are less protected. Well, yeah, so basically summarizing, budget the monies is one problem, because, you know, it seems that, you know, the boards, or if you were talking about SMEs, you know, the CEOs are not fully aware or are not committed from a budget perspective. And also, you know, the risks that are brought by, you know, in the IoT and industrial IoT, because at the end of the day, there is that tiny devices, tiny capabilities in terms of protection. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so let's start with the first issue. Yes, I agree that leadership and executive responsibility is a huge, I'm going to use the word problem, but we can use the word issue. The bottom line is that if the management, leadership, executives are not cyber aware and will not make the organization deploy the controls, well, the organization will be less secure. And I agree with your observation that one of the main reasons that executive responsibility is not assumed sufficiently is because of budgetary constraints. That's in my opinion, one of the main issues. Now, consider a CEO. He has a certain amount of money. He can either invest it in cybersecurity, which is protecting against the future, or he can invest it in promoting his business. It's a very, very tough decision. And a CEO that is not aware enough of the potential damages of cyber attacks will always choose his business. So this is why our role as a cybersecurity executives is also to educate, to constantly speak about threats, to discuss it with executive levels in order for them to be more cyber aware and to make the right decisions and invest sufficient dollars into cybersecurity. Now, regarding IoT or IIoT, I also agree with your observation. So technology moved ahead very, very quickly, and the controls are not sufficiently in place in order to protect it. And one of the reasons that I mentioned this area during my presentation is because I hope that at least some of my listeners today, or some of my audience today, are emerging startups that are trying to consider what areas are of interest to the larger corporations. And this is an area that is lacking sufficient technologies. So if you are a startup out there, well, this is an area you may want to pursue. Please do develop solutions for protecting IoT, for monitoring effectively IoT, for monitoring cybersecurity within a distributed environment. And please do contact us so we can learn more about your solution and maybe incorporate it into our offering.
Thank you very much. There is, if I am not abusing enough, you know, a lot, I want to touch upon a last topic that was very interesting for me. So basically, there is, it's clear, there is a lack of trained skill labor force in cyber, you know, and the trend is getting more acute. So when you talk about the collaboration between nations, for example, developing nations, in order to address this problem by training people, you know, and incorporating those people, those folks, into the cyber force to attack basically criminals. Okay, how do you see this happening? I mean, that's as you have much more experience on this, obviously, but I think this needs to be articulated basically at the politicians level, right? So there needs to be a vision, right, at the country level, at the national level, for countries to collaborate to address this problem, right? And in the meantime, you know, basically adding tremendous value to their economies, right? So it's not, that's not strikes me as an easy thing. Do you think that that's happening? Do you think that again, there is a awareness of that tremendous opportunity just to incorporate, you know, to include those nations, to boost their economies, to add opportunities to their people, you know, by helping actually the good guys, if you want, you know, address the cyber problem, which is gonna get tougher because everything is in an, I'm not saying exponential, but in a very accelerated process to digitalization. And actually, COVID, you link also very interesting in the presentation, digital and cyber with COVID. COVID accelerated that in a kind of a differential time. It was so small that it forced everybody to be there. So how can we, do you see awareness, the first thing, to implement these very high level programs, and how can we develop them? So how can we, for example, how can we, there is extremely high quality talent in cyber in Africa, for example. There is extremely high quality talent in Brazil or in Argentina. So how can we work together to integrate those folks just to deliver value to their countries and also to our economies and the world, if you want, the good guys, if you want.
Yes, so this is a great question, Jose. So we are now, IAI is now establishing cyber academies around the world in order to address this topic directly. So we are now in the process of establishing 5 academies in various developing countries around the world. So there are countries where the leadership has the vision and says, okay, I'm going to invest a little bit of money in order to establish an academy to train cyber experts, and eventually these cyber experts will help boosting my economy. So this is happening. It's also happening in developed countries. Today, developed countries understand that the cyber force is a huge contributor to the potential economy. And even in developed countries today, there's an issue of saying, okay, will we have enough jobs in the future? Or will we have enough labor force that will generate sufficient GDP within our country? So also developed countries are pursuing today the establishment of cyber academies and are challenging their industry and even the global industry to generate more and more cyber experts. Just by way of example, President Biden called a couple of months ago, he called 5 of the major tech companies in the US to a meeting. And he basically told them, hey guys, you need to help us train tech experts and cyber experts. And each of the companies took a part of the challenge on itself, and they are establishing academies and training facilities in order to help boost the economy. We're seeing a similar trend in India. We're seeing a similar trend in Singapore. And I believe eventually this will be a global trend. And if any of the audience are interested in establishing cyber academies, then please do give us a shout out. My email was on the screen. I'm available on LinkedIn. And we would be happy to advise you and to help you with establishing cyber academies in order to boost the cyber experts around the world and create a safer and more cyber secure world, which is one of our mutual goals.
Okay, thank you very much. Wonderful, Esti. I encourage, let me send a couple of messages. I encourage our audience, to get in touch with Esti. I mean, if they have not seen the presentation, this recording is going to be, this session is recorded and it's going to be shared next week. It is approved by all the speakers. So you're going to be able to directly contact Esti, or if you don't see the recording, just contact us and we're going to put you guys in touch. Because, I think collaborating, to secure the cyber world, I think is a necessary effort that we need to do together, because it's obvious also that the criminals and the bad guys, they are collaborating. So we need to do the same to win this war. Thank you very much, Esti. Amazing presentation. Please don't leave. Stay with us, because we have a very interesting presentation right now, talking about boosting cyber capability for a strong resilience through TOAR. Then we have an executive roundtable covering leveraging cyber threat intelligence to reduce cyber risk. And later in the North America Latin track, we are going to have one colleague from IAI-ELTA talking about the important topic of national level cybersecurity intelligence. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Toda raba. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Muchas gracias, Jose.
Gracias.